You are listening to Smart Women's Dating Podcast, episode number 76. Welcome to Smart Women's Dating Podcast. I am your host, certified life coach Lærke Nielsen, and I help smart, independent women attract the love they deeply desire without having to chase or settle. This podcast will give you the mindset, tools, and insights you need to finally crack the code to your love life. Are you ready? Then let's go. Hey friend, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a really special treat for you. It's a conversation with one of my clients who openly shares about her dating journey and the transformation that she has gotten throughout the past 7 or 8 months that we've worked together. When she reached out to me, she was already dating a little bit, but she had a pattern of going on maximum 3 to 4 dates with the same guy and never seemed to get beyond that fourth date. And then it would end and she would feel almost burnt out and she would take a break from the apps of several months, only to come back again and more or less have the same experience. But now and in the past 4 months, she's been going on 3 to 4 dates per week, and several of the guys she's met have turned into connections that lasted much longer than 5 dates. And she's actually seeing someone right now that she's very interested in. So, how did she do that? This is very much due to both the inner work, the mindset shift that we worked on before going back to dating, but also the practical tools of, for instance, setting boundaries to protect her energy, deciding how to spend her time inside the apps, tracking and evaluating her dates, not making decisions too fast, and keeping the momentum in her man funnel to get consistent dates. These are all dating skills, and that's something anyone can learn. None of us are born with it. We do not learn this in school, and most of us do not learn this from our parents either. So not having them to begin with is perfectly normal, and it doesn't mean anything about you as a person. In this interview, she also shares her perspective on having ADHD in a dating context and how she shifted her thoughts so she could stop feeling insecure about some of the aspects that would require her to explain her needs to a man and instead start to embrace them as superpowers that her future partner will love and appreciate about her. There is so much wisdom to be found in this conversation, so I'm just going to let you listen to it here. Enjoy. I just want to say thank you so much for joining and for allowing me to have this chat with you that we can share with the listeners your journey, what you've been going through in the past. What is it, like 7 months or something like that, maybe even longer? We've been working together.
I think so. It's been 7 months or more, and I've loved getting to work with you.
Great. And me too. I love working with you. So let's take it from the beginning. When you reached out to me, where were you in your dating journey?
So I think at that point, I had been out of my last serious relationship for maybe 9 years. And during that time, every year, my goal was to start dating and be in a serious relationship. But I'm very much a goal getter. And for whatever reason, I just wasn't able to do it. And so I reached a point, I think it was last summer, where I just felt like I was very much in a place to take action and recognize that I needed some support. And a friend had recommended your podcast. And I started listening. And then I reached out to do a consult call. And I feel like I knew immediately after that call that I wanted to work with you.
Oh, that's so great. I'm so happy to hear that. So you were at the time, as far as I remember, you were actually dating a little bit or not at all?
No, that's a good point. I was dating a little bit. And so in that 9-year period, I actually dated a lot. I just hadn't been in a serious relationship. And so I think last summer when I reached out, it was very normal for me where I was on the apps and I would reach out and meet someone, and then it would get to like 3, 4 dates and it wouldn't go anywhere. And then I would almost burn out and then I would stop dating for several months. So that was very much my pattern in the apps.
Yeah. I remember that there was like this hurdle you needed to go past the first couple of days and see that it was possible.
Exactly.
So maybe we'll just talk a little bit about some of the biggest transformations that you have gone through and that you've identified with yourself.
There are so many. Even when you were having me reflect on that question, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I have grown so much since that time. So I can think of a few, but if you think of any that I forget, let me know. I feel so much more empowered when I'm dating. And I think some of that is knowing myself better and being more comfortable being my authentic self when I'm on dates. I feel like my communication has also improved. I think I'm a strong communicator in general, but it's almost that I have the confidence to communicate on dates. And something I noticed very early on working with you was that that communication that I was developing, it wasn't just something I experienced on dates. I experienced stronger communication in all areas of my life. So that's been really neat to see. I think also becoming more comfortable setting boundaries
Mm.
is a big one as well. So that's definitely something I've developed. And again, super helpful in dating, but also helpful in all areas of life.
Yeah, that is so funny. This I hear often that we learn a skill in one area of life and then we can translate it to other areas. And boundaries is a big thing, right? It's something that we need to be able to set in many different situations.
Yep, exactly. I agree.
I think it's interesting you say you know yourself better, you feel more comfortable being yourself. Do you remember what it felt like before?
I do. And I would say in general, I'm a very authentic person. And this is where I feel like it can be so helpful to work with a coach because it helps you drill down a little bit to get underneath just to a deeper level. And so it was like, yes, I am comfortable being my authentic self in most areas of my life. But on a date, it was more difficult. And we did some exercise where I needed to identify more or less things that I wouldn't want a guy to find out about me or would make me uncomfortable if he found out about me. And then what you offered was it was either adjusting how I think about that and using thought work to really help embrace and accept that part of me. Or if it was something I couldn't accept, then I needed to change it. And so I feel like with that list, most of the things, it was me just embracing and accepting. And then there was like one thing where I was like, okay, I need to change that. But that has been so helpful, especially now, because I've been dating consistently for the past 3 or 4 months.
Mhm.
And that list of things, they're so neutral to me now. They're neutral or positive, where if I'm happy to share those aspects of me with a partner, that fear has just completely gone. So that's a huge transformation.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. When I do this exercise with my clients, there's always something that comes up where I wonder, why is this something that makes you feel vulnerable? It's completely normal. Or even a guy is going to love that about you.
That is so true. And I think
Yeah.
that is helpful too, to like just bring something to light and to get that feedback from another person where it's like, there's nothing weird about this. This is just
No.
completely normal, or, lots of people are like this. And it's almost like that probably helped give me the confidence too to then share that and then realize, oh, yeah, that is normal. And it's completely accepted or embraced,
Mm,
by another
mm.
person. And that's been
Yeah.
really special.
Yeah. Maybe you can give a few examples of some of the things where in the beginning you felt vulnerable if a man would find out, or something that you wouldn't feel comfortable sharing and that you now feel completely okay with.
Okay, yeah, I can remember I had a very long list for you when we started. So one of them would be I am neurodiverse, so I have ADHD, and I'm very sensitive to sensory stimulation. And this is something I know about myself and like about myself. I feel good about this. But it's hard for me when I'm dating someone, I need more quiet, I feel like, than the average
Mhm.
person. And that's something that's really hard for me. It wasn't necessarily accepted or embraced in my family. So then it's like, I don't know how to be that when I'm on a date or in a relationship. And one of the pieces of advice you had given me was to kind of lean into that quiet on date. as a way to embrace my feminine energy. So to sit back and to smile and just let that be. And so that was helpful. And then another reframe you had given me was to look at that as almost like my superpower. And I do agree with that, where it's like my quiet nature is what allows me to be a great listener and to
Mm.
be intuitive and to offer empathy. So
Yes.
that's something I want to embrace about myself and not change about myself.
Yes.
Yeah. So that I think was really helpful. And so recently I've been dating a guy for a couple of months. And ironically, he is quieter than I am. So
Mm.
I was not expecting that. And again, you challenged me to find ways to be quiet with him on dates or to bring up that in conversation, whatever that looked like. And it's so interesting how natural that was when I tried it. It
Okay.
just felt seamless. It felt so easy. And so it's all, and this is such, I think, a strong reminder of what's come up, like working with you, is that so much of this is something I've built up in my head that when it comes down to actually trying out an action is not that big of a deal.
Mm.
And that is very empowering as well. So that was one thing that came to mind that I
Yeah.
have a very different experience with now.
I love that you say that. And it's actually really important to be able to be quiet together, but it's not because we should just be quiet all the time. Of course, it's we communicate, that's how we get to know each other. But things can happen when you're quiet together as well. You can really feel comfortable with someone, or you can feel uncomfortable, but you can find out what it feels like to be quiet with someone. So that's a great skill to be able to. We also talked about needing time alone, and how I remember in the beginning you felt insecure whether that was okay. How would he react if you said, I need time alone? And where I told you a lot of men actually also need time alone. And so they appreciate when a woman doesn't necessarily need to be together all of the time. So some of the things that you brought up, for me, it seems to be like positive qualities that a lot of men will appreciate.
I think that's probably true, and I just hadn't realized it before. I had the idea that I needed to be on all the time and I needed to entertain,
Yeah.
which is not something that I can do forever. And so it makes sense why it would be so hard to go past, 3 or 4 dates when I'm like, I cannot be on constantly. Instead, finding a balance, like you said, of having great conversation and having high energy, but then also having just those quiet times together. And like you said, without that quiet time, I wouldn't have been able to just feel what that energy was like.
Mm.
And that was really good information to have.
Yeah. So especially once you've dated someone for a while, you can do this thing where you just are not talking all the time. And of course, even on the first dates, you could have moments of quiet time. But of course, there you want to have a bit more conversation. But imagine after 3 or 4 months, you spend a whole day together. You go on a hike, for instance. You can't chat all the time. Or most people can't. Most people need a moment, but just to relax. So it's actually really good to be natural about that and to feel that this is a part of my nature. I don't need to always be performing or entertaining. And also, I mean, after 3 to 4 dates, if that was how you did in the past, it would have been draining. It would have been exhausting to continue being the one who's leading the conversation and constantly coming up with new topics to discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we also talked a lot about boundaries. I remember setting a time boundary for both for calls, but also for first dates. Like I remember when we talked about setting a boundary for a phone call in the beginning, it felt difficult for you because it was like, okay, I'm going to be the one who's just ending the party here.
It's so true. Yes, we're so hard. And also, the boundaries that we kind of helped me establish for the first phone call, first dates, I also feel like that's what makes dating sustainable for me. And because at this point, I think on average, I've gone on 3 to 4 dates a week for the past 3 months. And so what has made that sustainable was those putting those boundaries in place. And they were so incredibly hard. So one of my boundaries is that I like to do a phone call before I meet with somebody in person. And then I just like to have that phone call be relatively short, so not longer than 30 minutes. And so setting that boundary was really difficult for me at first. And I feel like you helped me so often when I would send you a message and you would just encourage me. And the more I do it, the easier it is. I've never
Yeah.
gotten negative pushback around that, not once. And it just helps me practice really good communication as well. It's another opportunity to see how does the person respond when I communicate clearly like this, when I
Mm.
do set a boundary. So that's been really helpful. And then I do set another boundary on the first date where I like to have a first date that is something casual. And then also I like to have a time limit of, an hour to an hour and a half. And so
Mm.
that was hard at first too, but really helpful and empowering.
Yeah, that is really good because the first dates, if they go on for too long, we can either have a really great time, but it can also be really exhausting if it's not a good match and the conversation doesn't flow, but he maybe think it's a good match.
Completely. And I
Yeah.
know there were so many times where I might feel like, "Oh, I don't wanna go on this date today. I don't have the energy." And I could remind myself, "I'm going for 1 hour. I can do it for 1 hour." And then that would almost shift my energy, so then I could get more excited of like, "Okay, I'm gonna go hang out with somebody for 1 hour." And then I can, go on to whatever I need to do that day. So I wasn't dreading it as much, and so I think that mind shift was really helpful as well.
Mm.
And we talked about then if it's a really good date too, we're ending on like a really good note where it's like, "Oh, this is so short. I wanna see you again." We have that kind of energy at the end of the
Mm.
date.
And so you also have been tracking all your dates and you've been evaluating your dates. And that's also something I assume you didn't do in the past in the same systematic way.
Absolutely. No, I did not do that before. So this is it's very me. I'm so type A sometimes, but I do. I have a Google Doc and I have the
Yeah.
different guys that I'm dating, and then you have different questions to reflect on. So I would just do that before the date, and that was really helpful. I mean, before the date, it just puts me in that mindset of what do I already know? What do I want to know? And then afterwards to reflect. That
Mm.
just, again, it helped. I keep using the word empowered, but I think that's what it did. It gave me structured time to reflect so that I could learn from it. And whether it was a great experience or not so great experience, I think the reflection made it into something positive. So it was
Mm.
helpful.
The point is to also, whenever we say no to someone, that we know our reasons. We know why we are deselecting someone. And that we also can reflect a little bit on our own approach to the date and whether we want to change something or we feel okay with our own way of showing up.
Definitely. That's been really helpful.
So, in general, when you think about dating, how has your thoughts changed?
That's a great question. I think I would say this. I don't think I've ever had negative feelings towards dating in general. I think the apps are great. I That's how I primarily meet people. But what's different now is that I feel like I have the skill set that I need to be successful dating. And even saying that, it makes it more about skills that I can learn as opposed to who I am.
Mm.
So if something works or doesn't work, it has nothing to do with who I am as a person. It's more like, is this something that a skill that I can learn, or is this something that I can adjust? And that makes me less anxious about dating. It just makes dating more doable. And at the end of the day, dating is not something that I plan or want to do for the rest of my life. This is a means to an end ultimately.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, I mean, that's what it's meant to be. It's a skill set to help me get to a certain place. And I feel like I understand better how to use that skill set. So I think that's been a huge transformation for me.
Yeah. That was actually my next question was what are some skills that you can identify you have learned? Maybe I can rephrase it to if you were to point out three important skills in dating, what do you think it would be?
Boundaries is at the top. That
Yeah.
definitely comes to
Yeah.
mind. And I think, yeah, knowing what boundaries you want to set ahead of time and then knowing how you want to set them, how you want to communicate those, that's really helpful. This is like a very practical skill set, but just having a plan for how to use the apps. So in general, I go on twice a day. So I do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. And then once a week, I will go on to kind of build up my queue. And so I think just having that kind of a structure
Mm.
that's consistent, that's a skill that's been helpful. And you'll have to let me know if you think this is a skill or not. But I do think that knowing how I want to show up on the dates and having a clear understanding of how I would want to see my partner show up. So that would be like being in my feminine energy and
Mm.
seeing that he's in his masculine energy. So I think just recognizing if we're both in those areas, that's been a helpful skill set too, because that's very much what I want. And
Mm.
so then I can control if I'm in my feminine energy, and then I can observe whether or not he is, and then I can make decisions based on that.
Yeah, that's definitely a skill as well. And how have you experienced this whole thing about feminine energy? I remember you were in many areas naturally in your feminine energy.
I agree with that. And so that's interesting because I do agree that in many ways, I think I was naturally in it and I didn't even realize that. And I think learning more about it and talking with you, it also gave me confidence to continue doing the things that I
Mm.
was already doing. Whereas before, maybe I was doing them, but I was second guessing or I wasn't
Mm.
sure. And this just gave me a lot of confidence. There were so many things that I, in the past, was already doing that I feel like you just helped encourage me, like, yes, that is really good to do that or to look for that. And so that
Mm.
was very helpful. I think I also had the struggle that I think is common where it's like, well, does being in my feminine energy mean that I'm not a feminist and that I'm not a strong, independent woman? I definitely remember having that conversation. And I understand that no, that's not the case
No,
at all.
no.
It's very much a both and with feminine
Yes.
energy.
Yes, and it's true that you were from the beginning. We didn't actually spend a lot of time discussing how to shift into the feminine energy because you were like more or less naturally already operating from a feminine energy. And of course, there are areas of life where we are in masculine that we can't get out of that if we have a career and we make decisions in our life. We are in our masculine energy, but it came very natural to you. And another thing that also I have experienced came natural to you, and maybe you want to correct me there, but that was having a man funnel because you had actually regular dates for a long time. You're very good at keeping it going, keeping the momentum. So, how did it feel for you in the beginning where you were encouraged to date several men in parallel?
So in general, I like that. Is something that feels comfortable to me because it takes the pressure off of any one of those dates. So
Yeah.
that feels very comfortable to me. In January, I think there was a point where I was on like 7 or 8 dates a week, and that was too much, and that was not sustainable.
Yeah.
But then when that got whittled down to 2 or 3 a week, that has been I think that's been just incredibly helpful, and I can't imagine early on dating in a different way. It just takes the pressure off all
Mm,
of those dates.
mm. And if I can ask you to share, where are you now in your dating journey? After you started maybe early January, right? Because you set up your profile and then we had some back and forth on the pictures and so on. And then you started being active 4 months ago, approximately.
Yep, about 4 months ago, and I think I've gone on almost 40 dates since then.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
and
awesome. That's really well done. That's, it's a record, I would say.
well, when you set a goal, I'm gonna achieve the goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've gone on a lot of dates this year, and I think something that's neat about that is that's not like 40 first dates. Like, some of those men I've dated,
Yeah.
for longer, and
Yeah.
I've definitely gotten over that hurdle of 3 to 4 dates.
Yes.
That is huge for me. And so, right now, I have been dating a guy for just over 2 months that I really like, and I'm very interested in him, so I'm very excited and curious to see where that goes.
Yes. And you still have a number of other dates every week, or
I do. Yep. So I still have other dates. The energy definitely has shifted because now there's somebody that I am very interested in. But yes, I'm still active in the apps. I still
mm,
have different phone calls. And really what this does, because I do get the question from my friends, like, why aren't you, then why not just be exclusive at this point? And it's like,
yeah,
well, because I'm ultimately dating not just for a long-term relationship, but I'm dating to find my long-term partner for marriage. So I really dating right now is a time for me to get information and see what our energy is like and have different
yeah,
experiences with it. And what happens right now for me when I'm dating other men is, in many ways, it just points me back to him. They have things where I'm like, "Oh, I thought I wanted that, but I realize I want this instead." Or, "Oh, I'm so grateful that this other man
Yeah.
has this trait." So
Yeah.
that's what I'm noticing is happening right now.
So when you are dating, this is very interesting point, right? You are dating someone that you're interested in, but you keep your man funnel open and you keep seeing other guys, and those are only confirming your interest in the first person. So it's
Yes.
not like you feel more confused or you are split around what to do next, and or you feel that you are going behind his back or things like that.
Nope, not at all. And also with behind his back. So that's a conversation that we've had as well. So that's so important to me to be honest and straightforward. And so all the men I talk to and date right now, they confirm how much I like this other man.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So it sounds like you could be pretty close to having found the right one, but still in the situation where you're still giving it a bit more time to find out. And I think that's really a healthy choice to give it at least 3 months, maybe a little bit more, because you're looking for marriage. You're looking for lifelong commitment here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also makes me feel, it gives me confidence to just take that time and know that if this is meant to be, it will work out. And so we have this time to get to know each other really well before we commit.
So I have been so happy working with you. I really have enjoyed that. And I'm so grateful that you want to share your journey here on the podcast. So if you have maybe do you have one last recommendation for anyone listening out there about their dating journey and how to move forward if they feel stuck?
I would absolutely recommend working with a coach. That was a game changer for me. I would not be where I am today, having gone on 40 dates in this amount of time without
And I
working.
didn't ask you to say that.
You did not
That's
ask me to say that.
all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
So that was it for today, and I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. And if you want to go on the same journey to learn the dating skills that allow you to meet good men, potential future partners, and eventually one person that you stay interested in for a longer time and that could turn into a lifelong relationship, then all you have to do is book a free consult call with me and hear about the possibilities to do that. The link is in the show notes and on my Instagram bio at Lerke the Love Coach. I can't wait to hear from you, and in the meantime, have a wonderful week and enjoy dating. If you like what you're hearing on this podcast and you want to get support from a coach on your love journey, I invite you to book a free consult call with me. You will find the link in the show notes. And also, don't forget to subscribe, and I would love it if you would rate and review this podcast, and then you'll also help other women find it.